President Trump spoke by phone today with Russian President Vladimir Putin about a possible ceasefire deal in the war in Ukraine. The talk comes 11 years to the day after Russia annexed the Ukrainian territory of Crimea. Fighting has been basically ongoing ever since, escalating with Russia's 2022 full-scale invasion. Now the world is watching as Trump seeks to make a deal with Putin. Trump says he wants to stop the killing, but many world leaders worry concessions to Putin could lead to further aggression. Joining us to discuss the latest, Brett Samuels, White House correspondent here at The Hill. Brett, do we have any idea of how long this talk went today and what was discussed?
Yeah, so this call between Trump and Putin lasted for a little under 3 hours when all was said and done. Hard to read into the length because obviously translators are involved, sort of volleying back and forth between what the two leaders are saying. But nearly a 3-hour conversation. Initial readouts from both sides offer a slightly differing picture. The White House readout provided very few specifics, but said that any ceasefire agreement would begin with a ceasefire on attacks on energy infrastructure, so power plants, for example, and other energy grids. The Russian readout indicated that Trump had proposed a 30-day ceasefire on those attacks on energy infrastructure and that Russia had responded positively to that. So there may be an indication we do get that very limited 30-day pause in attacks on that specific area. But as far as a broader, longer-term ceasefire goes, it could lead to peace. No initial indications that that was reached in this call.
It would seem that this version of a ceasefire would have to go back to Vladimir Zelensky in Ukraine because that's not exactly what he agreed to when he agreed to Trump's terms, and I don't know if he'd agree to that.
Absolutely, and I think, going into this talk between Trump and Putin, there was some talk from Secretary of State Marco Rubio, for example, that if Russia did not agree to the ceasefire that had been proposed, that Ukraine had agreed to, it will be clear, which side is the impediment to peace here. So will be certainly interesting to watch the reactions from the Trump administration about if they are hard on Russia, if they do say we have to go back to Ukraine now and get this approved. But very incremental steps here, but certainly a sign that Russia is not in a hurry here to bring this war to an end.
Yeah, and a lot of people think that Russia is going to be hesitant to agreeing to any ceasefire right now. They're making gains on the battlefield. They're seen as having someone in the White House who's more likely to side with them in some of these land disputes or different concessions that are being made in the interest of peace. It seems like it's going to be a pretty big test for Trump to see kind of where he lands with Russia in these negotiations.
Absolutely. As you mentioned, it comes at a time when already skeptics, European allies, are already sort of nervously watching this. They feel like Trump is reorienting U.S. policy to be a little bit more aligned with Russia. One thing that didn't come up in any of the readouts of this conversation was any talk of territorial concessions. That was a big concern. Would Ukraine be forced to essentially cede territory that Russia had taken over on the battlefield as part of any ceasefire agreement? So, next steps will certainly be closely watched as far as how Trump responds, how Zelensky responds in Ukraine, and where things go from here.
The whole world will be watching to see how Trump tries to spin this and sell it, I'm assuming with a post on Truth Social, so we'll be looking for that. Want to ask you about President Trump's latest appointments to military boards at West Point, the Air Force, and the Air Force and Naval Academies. General Michael Flynn pled guilty to lying to the FBI. Walt Nauta, he was indicted by the special counsel in the classified documents case. Then there's conservative activist Charlie Kirk, Senator Tommy Tuberville, former college football coach. Neither of those two have any experience with the military. What do you think is the project Trump is working on by making these appointments?
Yeah, certainly. I think it's sort of twofold when I look at it. On the one hand, I think much like everything else with Trump, this comes down to loyalty. He wants to reward people who are loyal to him, who have stuck by him, who have supported him and align with his agenda. You mentioned Charlie Kirk, obviously a big Trump supporter, Tommy Tuberville, a big Trump supporter. Sean Spicer is on the Naval Board. Sean Spicer, of course, was in the Naval Reserves, so a bit different there, but he did serve in Trump's first administration. Walt Nauta, of course, has been Trump's body man, essentially, one of his closest personal aides for years, and as you mentioned, was a co-defendant with Trump in that documents case. So on the one hand, I think it's loyalty. On the other hand, I think it is trying to, as he did with the Kennedy Center, similarly, purge these boards of people who he doesn't think agree with him, doesn't align with his worldview, put in place people who will more closely align and sort of carry out his agenda.
President Trump has pulled Secret Service protection for the children of former President Biden, both Hunter and Ashley Biden. got their security details taken away. It's not entirely unexpected. The adult children of former presidents normally lose protection after their parents leave office, but there's usually a longer grace period. I think President Biden gave about 6 months for President Trump's kids when he came into office. But there is a pattern of Trump using the removal of security protections as a way to get back at people that have crossed him in the past. This is something that even some Republicans have criticized and asked him to kind of revisit.
Yeah, as you mentioned, it is part of a broader pattern. In the first few months that Trump has been in office, we've seen him revoke security clearances, or not security clearances, security details, in addition to security clearances, security details for Anthony Fauci, for Mark Milley, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mike Pompeo, former Secretary of State, John Bolton, former National Security Advisor, and now Hunter Biden and Ashley Biden. And certainly in some of these cases, these are people who are under credible threats. For example, Mike Pompeo, John Bolton, former Trump administration officials, they were under credible threats of Iran, from Iran, the Biden administration determined, so they granted these security details. Hunter Biden obviously has certainly been a recurring target for Republican investigations, Republican attacks, conspiracy theories, so that is certainly notable. So certainly, Trump, for all the talk of his being fixated on retribution and revenge, this seems to be one way that he is carrying it out by revoking these security details.
Embattled Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer got something of a lifeline today from the top Democrat over in the House. Hakeem Jeffries says he does think that Chuck Schumer should keep his leadership position. Some in the Democratic base have been furious with Schumer over his vote to help pass a Republican funding bill last week. Some prominent progressive organizations have been calling for him to step down. How important is what Jeffries said today? Yeah,
New York lawmakers sticking together there. Certainly, I think Hakeem Jeffries, his word carries a lot of weight for a couple reasons. Obviously, one, he is the leader of the Democratic Party in the House. Certainly, if he says he has Schumer's back, that carries a lot of weight with that conference, where we saw some folks like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez be very critical of Schumer. Hakeem Jeffries is also certainly a younger lawmaker, somebody that is often talked about when Democrats talk about sort of the next generation of leadership, future leaders. So I think for Schumer, somebody who is on the older side, who certainly faces that kind of spotlight about whether he should make room for the next generation, to get the backing of somebody like Jeffries, as you said, I think does give him a bit of a lifeline at a time when he's really under the microscope.
Jeffries has kind of been a little bit crossways with some on the Democratic base too, so I don't know if it's a complete lifeline, but definitely interesting development. No indication, though, that Senator Schumer is going anywhere in his leadership position, but I do wonder if all this pressure that Democrats are getting from their base to fight Trump is going to cause them to act differently. There's been this talk of them taking more risks in their opposition to Trump. How can we see that manifest?
Yeah, certainly I think you could see, Democrats holding the floor of the Senate or the House to make a point to filibuster Republican legislation. You could see them, certainly being more aggressive in how they are messaging and attacking Republicans, both at the Capitol and on social media. We saw they're holding a day of action on Tuesday to focus specifically on Medicaid cuts and sort of raise awareness around that. So certainly, as you said, could see them get more aggressive. Obviously, we're still, almost 20 months away from the midterm. So, I think it's fair to say this is sort of a trial period for Democrats. They're still maybe finding their footing. And while there's a lot of impatience and frustration, certainly I think some Democrats are trying to figure out what is the best strategy that they can certainly retake the House and gain seats in the Senate in November.
We're running out of time, but I really want to ask you about this article that you wrote about the relationship between President Trump and Elon Musk. Many have predicted that this bromance between the two would sour. It has not. Why?
Yeah, rumors of their demise, I guess, were premature. But, it seems at the end of the day, as you said, Trump is somebody who has historically not liked sharing the spotlight, especially when that person seems to be speaking for him. Elon Musk seemed to sort of check those boxes, which is why people thought this would sort of crumble. But at the end of the day, Elon Musk certainly, he has a big pocketbook. He's provided a lot of financial support for Trump, and there's indications he's going to continue to do that. I think Trump respects Musk as a businessman, certainly. And ultimately, I think he approves of what Musk is doing with Doge, where he's slashing government spending, government workforce. Musk provides a bit of a shield for Trump, where he maybe takes some of the heat where Trump doesn't. So, we see Musk and his young son at the White House almost every day, it seems, traveling on Air Force One. So, for now, it seems like this relationship is still going strong.
I think the concept of mutually assured destruction plays heavily into that relationship continuing. All right, we'll leave it at that. Brett Samuels, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Drew.
The 2-month-long ceasefire in Gaza was shattered overnight in what's become one of the deadliest days in the war between Israel and Hamas. A series of deadly airstrikes launched by Israel has wounded at least 560 people and killed more than 400, including more than 260 women and children, according to the Gaza Health Ministry. News Nation's Robert Sherman is live at the White House with how the president is reacting and what it means for the region.
We know that a key focus of these overnight strikes conducted by the IDF was targeting and eliminating top Hamas officials. The IDF saying that they did end up killing the head of Hamas inside of the Gaza Strip, who served as a major conduit between Hamas operations inside of the enclave as well as outside of Gaza. Several other high-ranking members of both Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad were eliminated as well. You look at those airstrikes, they hit targets across the Gaza Strip, including Gaza City, Han Yunis, and Rafah. Since that ceasefire took hold, we have not seen airstrikes of this magnitude until now. The Hamas-run Gazan Health Ministry claims hundreds were killed, though the specific numbers vary and are not independently verifiable. Meanwhile, the Israelis are making clear they intend to reapply and amplify pressure on Hamas until all hostages are back home.
Let me be very clear. Israel will not stop until all of our hostages are back home. We will make it very clear to the Security Council that if they want to stop the war in Gaza, they have to ensure that the hostages are coming back to Israel. We are committed to bring them back.
There is still one more living hostage in Gaza with U.S. citizenship. That would be Edan Alexander. And the White House says it is a top priority for them to get him home at this hour. Drew?
News Nation's Robert Sherman, thank you for your reporting. A bill introduced in the Minnesota legislature would revise state law to include a new form of mental illness, Trump Derangement Syndrome. The bill, introduced by 5 Republican state senators, defines the syndrome as the acute onset of paranoia in otherwise normal persons that is in reaction to the policies of President Donald Trump. TDS, as Trump and his supporters refer to it, has long been cited by the president as a way to label his critics as mentally ill. Among those diagnosed with TDS by the president are his former chief of staff, John Kelly, and former January 6 committee members, Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger. That's today's Daily Debrief. I'm Drew Petrimoulx. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel, and come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.